Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, obviously there is a ton going on beyond COVID. Obviously, we're dealing with the fires out west, the hurricane in the south, the despicable shooting of the police officers in California, and then all of the politics and COVID. So there's just a ton going on, and we will get to all of it. But I do want to start with COVID and our COVID coverage, and Matthew.
Morning, Jeff. So all eyes right now on the final weeks and months of vaccine trials, as the president still seems to be making a mockery of the safety advice, even with all that has come out in the recent days. We stand this morning at over 6.5 million U.S. cases and 194,000 deaths. We have yet to see signs of those predicted surges. Those come later in the fall and winter, say the forecasters. But right now, the daily average of new cases and deaths are both down about 17% over the last 2 weeks. Again, in the face of that IHME prediction of over 400,000 deaths by the beginning of the year. The Pfizer CEO says there is a good chance they will know by the end of next month if the vaccine works, and they've started manufacturing hundreds of thousands of doses now. AstraZeneca is resuming its final phase trial in the UK only after that safety pause. And, of course, we'll hear much more in a minute about Trump's packed indoor Nevada rally, no distancing, violating state orders, violating White House task force guidance, adding to all the questions about why we had to get here. The key numbers, the key regions, the CNN map for the moment is looking very green, with 8 states up, 16 steady, and 24 down week to week. It's a handful of Midwestern and Western states making up most of the red: Wyoming, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nebraska, and Utah. And when it comes to per capita cases, North and South Dakota are the highest right now. But the entire southern half of the U.S. is steady or down on average compared to a week ago. We just learned that Georgia Governor Kemp plans to extend a stay-at-home order for the high-risk population, which was set to expire tomorrow, and Nick Valencia is in Atlanta, can be on that. In Florida, after weeks and weeks of declining case numbers, Miami-Dade and Broward make a big move to phase 2 today, which can pave the way for in-person schools and technically allows for businesses like bars and nightclubs to open, but local leaders say they are not going to allow that to happen anytime soon. And then in San Francisco, salons and gyms allowed to open on a limited basis starting today. On the school front, lots more examples of badly behaved college students over the weekend, making the problem worse. Social videos that we're working to clear circulating of off-campus parties and illicit tailgates at places like Florida State and Kansas. FSU is starting random testing today for students and staff. They're hoping to test 5 to 10% of the population each day, looking for asymptomatic spread. There were all those concerns about NYU gatherings at Washington Square Park. Ohio State already canceling spring break. Bianca Golodriga live on the education thread. And Rosa Flores files a piece for the lead and sit room on Florida schools 1 month into the reopening with lots of outbreaks in districts. The governor has been ordering some districts to stop releasing detailed COVID data. Some parents not happy, taking matters into their own hands. A couple of other health notes. The CEO of the company that makes remdesivir, the only drug authorized to treat COVID, now says there is sufficient supply nationwide. There were lots of shortage problems. We're going to try to get a read from around the country on whether this is actually true. Pfizer CEO also said the company wants to expand the pool of coronavirus vaccine trial volunteers, and Moderna also increasing minority representation in the trials. And we will get a new study from JAMA in about 2 hours that children without symptoms of COVID carry the virus less frequently than adults in the same situation by a pretty big margin. We have Elizabeth Cohen and Jacqueline Howard available through the day, and Sanjay Live starting with the lead. And then just alerted, CNN has learned that Big Ten officials are expected to vote as soon as today on going ahead with an abbreviated season. The rap pieces today are Athena Jones for 4, 6, and 8, and Nick Watt for 5, 7, and 9. And I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, Matthew, we'll be coming back to you for all of the rest of the domestic news in a moment. But let's go to international COVID, please.
So Jeff, World Health Organization this weekend reporting a record day of global cases, almost 308,000 in one 24-hour period. India, the US, Brazil are still the big drivers, but we're seeing this surge in Europe also starting to add into those numbers. So digging into those, Israel's become the first country to announce a second lockdown, starting this Friday and lasting for 3 weeks. They had a very, very stringent lockdown at the beginning of the pandemic, and now with cases surging, they're reenacting that lockdown. Oren's going to be covering that story for us. Europe is struggling across the board, really, with the resurgence of the virus. France topped 10,000 daily cases for the first time on Saturday, added another 7,000 on Sunday. Macron is doing all he can to avoid going to a second lockdown, and he's going to meet Angela Merkel this week to discuss the escalating crisis, not just in his country, but across Europe. The real balancing act for most European countries: how do you contain the health crisis without damaging what is a very fragile economic recovery? And we saw economic tensions really to the forefront in France with the return of the Yellow Vest protests over the weekend. Hundreds were arrested as people took to the streets. Melissa Bell will be covering that for us. In the UK, today begins the new Rule of Six law for social distancing. This brings a limit on the maximum size of any social gathering down from 30 people to just 6. This is the country's opposition leader, Keir Starmer, goes into self-isolation after a member of his family, his household, was displaying symptoms, and he's awaiting the test results. Scott McLean is covering everything from the UK for us. Italy, children go back to school. In some cases, they do a week in, week out. Italy's also got the EU's oldest teaching workforce, so there's a lot of concerns there from within that working force. Billy Gallagher has been filing wits on that for various shows. And in Germany, a really good story, which Fred is on for us. Authorities blaming a 26-year-old US woman's blatant flouting of social distancing for a dramatic spike in cases in one Bavarian town. Hundreds of cases have popped up in this one town, which are all sourcing back to this woman and her associates in the town. It's an area that's very popular with off-duty US troops. And just a side note, just in terms of other countries who are struggling, neighbouring Austria says that they are now at the beginning of a second wave of the virus, with the capital Vienna particularly dramatic. They're seeing caseloads that they haven't seen since the beginning of March, and this is something that we're seeing right across Europe now. A lot of countries hitting new records not seen since the beginning. So Austria is just an interesting sort of case study on how it's really affecting every single country. I'll leave it there on COVID.
Thank you very much, Mike. Business.
Jeff, good morning. Dow futures rising solidly, including the S&P and NASDAQ. This on the big merger deals and coronavirus vaccine news that Matthew just laid out. Of course, Congress fully backed stimulus talks remaining absolutely nowhere. The only real hope, perhaps, is a deal to avoid a government shutdown at the end of this month. Mnuchin on CNBC moments ago saying that he's open to talk on economic stimulus and adds that a deal could be possible on stopgap measures if he could make a deal with U.S. House Speaker Pelosi. This will obviously be the big subject tomorrow when the Fed meets for its two-day meeting. This is the last Fed meeting before the election. Powell, once again, likely to pressure Congress to get its act together and help the recovery of the economy. Christine Romans, Allison Cossack, Richard Quest available on those threads. And media, Brian Stelter has been tracking how major TV networks decided to stay outside of that rally yesterday inside a manufacturing plant in Nevada. Yesterday, marking the first fully indoor rally since Tulsa in June. News outlets exhibiting more responsibility than the president. Brian says he is up and available on that upon request, and that is where we begin on COVID.
Thank you very much. Washington.
So about that rally, the president is traveling the country aggressively flouting these COVID guidelines. Probably the most egregious example in months last night with this stunningly packed, largely maskless indoor rally in Nevada. The state does not allow more than 50 people. Trump making light of that during the campaign rally, saying he would help if the state came after them. This is the first indoor rally the president has had since Tulsa. which we all know is followed by a surge of cases, and the death of Herman Cain, and it's almost as though the president is actively, creating situations that spread this virus. Dr. Reiner calling the packed rally negligent homicide. The governor was furious, and this all comes as over the weekend there was new Woodward audio where the president claims that nothing more could have been done. Jamie will also have more audio at noon today on Trump and COVID. And then also add to the list the HHS as one of the government agencies where political appointees are pushing to change the language on these weekly science reports so that they're not undermining Trump's message. And then obviously we had this incredible Jake holding Navarro's feet to the fire over him trying to spin the COVID language. Just in terms of election integrity, which isn't far from this, Trump continues railing against mail-in voting and urging his supporters to vote twice. There are, however, real problems cropping up in Pennsylvania with absentee ballots. They were supposed to go out today, and they're being held up because of the Green Party and how they're what's actually on these ballots. So Kristen Holmes is up with that, and I think that is what I've got to cover.
Okay. Obviously, it's hard to separate COVID and politics from all of this. As Virginia just said, at noon today, we will have more and new and fresh audio tape from Bob Woodward's interviews with the president. That will roll out on John King's show at noon. And then just so everybody knows, Bob Woodward will be the guest for the hour tomorrow night with Anderson at 8 p.m. Again, with more audio and fresh new audio there as well. And I would just offer that as we spend all this time listening to this audio of Woodward and Trump, and there's a lot of understandable, concern about what he did or did not do back in January and February, I think it's probably even more important to, we can all have, points of view of what he should or shouldn't have done. But just look at what he's doing now, vis-a-vis COVID and last night's rally and the way he's talking and behaving now. That's actually even more important in my mind because we are where we are, right? In the words of Donald Trump, it is what it is. That's all past. What he is doing now and how he's behaving now should be dealt with now. Okay, let me open it up for any thoughts on COVID. Okay, there's a ton going on. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody wanted to...
No, I just connecting what Virginia said about how the DHS press secretary, who was a Trump campaign aide, is pressuring the CDC to water down its official reports, combined with what Trump said to Woodward, that he's downplaying the virus. It's absolute proof that they're manipulating CDC papers and guidance to the country to downplay the virus for Trump's electoral benefit. It's, everything is stunning with Trump, but manipulating CDC scientific papers, that it's really unbelievable, and it tracks with what he said he wants to do, which is downplay the virus.
Okay, so I was just to add on to that, what Sam is talking about and what is the focus of this report, these reports are called the CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. They are not meant to be press releases. They're not meant to be guidance. These are hard reports coming out from the CDC that we here at Health and Science journalists across the country look to and expect every week. They are a big deal. They are supposed to come right from scientists themselves.
So I was going to actually tie this together in a different way later, but so I think that's really important what Virginia, Sam, and Ben have just talked about the CDC and HHS and what's going on there. But this continued assault on science is that there's another piece of it and again, I was going to get to this when we get to fires and the hurricanes, but I'll do it now. Over the weekend, NOAA, or the Trump administration, put in at NOAA into a top position there a professor, I believe from the University of Delaware, if I'm not mistaken, who questions the seriousness and severity of global warming for the top role at NOAA. So you've got, on one hand, what the Trump administration and campaign are doing with the CDC reports, and then on the other hand, you've got what they're doing at NOAA on questioning global warming, and all, both of these came to light this weekend. I do think we could tie both of those together, and I think both in digital and in television, we should try to do that. Okay, Matthew, let me come back to you for hurricanes and fires.
Okay, I'll start with the fires. Yeah. Much of the West just overwhelmed in every way. Thousands are fleeing, many displaced. There are dozens dead. Air quality is terrible for millions. Of course, as Trump visits the region today, and as you know, in denial over the very climate crisis so many are pointing to here. At least 35 dead in California, Oregon, and Washington, dozens missing. A vast region choked with bad air. This line from Senator Merkley. He drove 600 miles and never escaped smoke. 500,000 people under evacuation orders in Oregon alone, many with nowhere to go. Almost 17,000 firefighters at work on this in California alone. And, of course, the science part of it, as you say, the intense blame on inaction on climate change and anger that this argument that it's only about forest management, Merkley calling that a devastating lie, Newsom saying the debate is over on climate change, should make for an interesting meeting when he and President Trump meet at the briefing this afternoon. The deadliest fire is California's North Complex fire, about 100 miles north of Sacramento. It killed 14 people alone, and we have Dan Simon poised to head to that area for the afternoon. We've got Stephanie Elam and Keon La splitting the day from Arcadia, California, near the Bobcat fire. We've got Martin Savage right now in Oregon, and just emphasizing, these are different regions. It's a vast area, and it's terrible everywhere, and it doesn't have to be one or the other team. Lots of date lines at play here. Soon to be Hurricane Sally. The Gulf Coast starting to feel the first effects right now of what will be a very slow-moving storm, and will stay over Louisiana for probably way too long, bringing the threat of an incredible amount of rain and flooding. And I'll turn it over to Dave for the quick forecast.
Yeah, so it looks like it'll be a hurricane later this morning or during the afternoon. It's now a 65-mile-per-hour storm. Looks better on satellite this morning. It's going to continue to develop. It will make its closest path, we think, to New Orleans sometime tomorrow afternoon. Looks like the center will pass east of New Orleans, which will spare them the worst, but it's pretty close, so we'll have to keep a close eye on that. It'll move into Mississippi late tomorrow or early Wednesday, and as Matthew noted, with this slow movement, we'll not only see hurricane conditions, storm surge, hurricane-force winds that'll last well into Wednesday, but this is shaping up to be a very extreme flood event along the Gulf Coast. Some areas could see 2 feet of rain.
And then the other part to this story is that the region is sort of dealing with two other issues. Obviously, the pandemic, Louisiana once again not opening shelters due to the threat, and there are still a large number of evacuees from Hurricane Laura in the New Orleans area, so there's that issue. And just noting, as we talk about extreme weather and the science, there are 5 different systems active in the Atlantic right now, and this is only the second time this has ever happened, and the last one was 1971. We've got Ed Lavandera and Gary Tuckman splitting the day in New Orleans, the full weather team complement, other folks moving in tomorrow. And Jeff, did you want me to mention just a couple of other things or stop there?
No, please go ahead. Let's do all of it.
Okay. Whoever is responsible for that devastating ambush on 2 L.A. County deputies is still on the loose right now. The 2 deputies are out of surgery. The sheriff says it looks like they're going to be able to recover. They survived the worst, he says. We still don't know what this was about or who's responsible. There's a $100,000 reward up for information leading to an arrest. We've got Josh Campbell live through the day, Sarah Seidner up for prime on this one. There's the story in Georgia of the deputy now fired over that video showing him repeatedly punching a man in custody in front of his family. There still are a lot of answers that we need about how this traffic stop got so out of control. But the attorney for Roderick Walker says the car was stopped for a broken taillight, that Walker merely pushed back when he was asked for ID because he wasn't the one driving. And the Clayton County, Georgia DA is now running a criminal investigation, Diane Gallagher, on that. And just noting, of course, the first big NFL Sunday of the pandemic, at least 18 staying off the field for the anthem in lots of different ways. The Vikings players locking arms as the Floyd family looked on. Colin Kaepernick tweeting, the NFL is running propaganda about how they care about black life, pointing to actively blackballing Eric Reed.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew, because there's a ton. I obviously want to highly emphasize the fire coverage up and down the west coast of the United States. It goes without saying, and it's cliche, but if this was up and down the east coast of the United States, this would be 24 hours a day of coverage on CNN. So we need to be very committed to covering this. Obviously, we have a hurricane about to hit the United States again tonight. New Orleans obviously brings its own issues, and so we're dealing with a lot of things again, which is why I think that story about the NOAA University of Delaware professor that NOAA has put in or downplays climate change and global warming is so important. And then I cannot emphasize enough the despicable shooting of the two sheriff deputies in California and Los Angeles, and frankly the despicable display afterwards at the hospital by people suggesting that they should die. We need to make sure we're all over this. We have the video. Make sure we keep using that video because it brings it home, and I don't want to let up on that. So between COVID, fires, and hurricanes, and the shooting, and politics, the Woodward tapes, we have a very busy day. International.
Staying busy overseas too. Some strong exclusive content. Starting with Greece, Nick Robertson meets with the Greek president on the tiny Mediterranean island at the centre of these escalating tensions between Greece and its neighbour Turkey. At issue, the huge reserves of oil and natural gas in the disputed waters south of this island, Castellarizo, which is only 2 miles from Turkey, population just 500. It's the reason these two NATO allies are now as close to a military conflict as they have been any time in decades. Just this weekend, the Greeks bought 18 fighter jets from France and announced they're adding 15,000 troops to their army. And the president tells Nick, to have peace, you must always be prepared for war. So clearly saber-rattling and ratcheting up the tensions further. So Nick is wrapping around his interview for us today, and Jemana is picking up Turkish reaction from Istanbul. We also have a really powerful piece from NEMA on the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. A look at what happens to a country when it's on the brink of starvation. US aid has been cut off. Other countries dial back relief supplies. And all this as it struggles to deal with the global pandemic and an endless war. So 80% of the country's 30 million population relies on aid relief. And the majority live in this Iranian-backed Houthi rebel north of the country. 75% of all UN programs have been shuttered following concerns the Houthis were misappropriating the aid. So that has left everyone in this desperate situation. NEMA's got some exclusive access to a child malnutrition clinic right in the heart of this Houthi-controlled north in Yemen. The piece is releasing for Sit-Room on the US side of things, and it's been running overnight for us. There's a mandatory row-approved tag. Just a really powerful, harrowing piece. Lastly, Belarus, the ambassador President Lukashenko heads to Russia to meet Putin today. His first trip outside the country since the mass protests sparked by his re-election. 100,000 people again on the streets this weekend, so people aren't giving up their fight for democracy there. Matthew Chance is covering that. And then a couple of last things on China. David Culver is available on merit on the US ambassador to China stepping down, and Selena Wang from Hong Kong on the TikTok development as it chooses Oracle ahead of Microsoft as its business partner in the US. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mike. I do want to echo Mike's comments about Nema's piece out of Yemen. It may feel, in the list of stories that I just ran down and all that we're dealing with, can we really, we have 5.5 minute piece on what's going on with starvation in Yemen. Trust me, it is a heartbreaking story, and this is what CNN needs to do, because nobody else is going to tell this story, and we can afford the 5.5 minutes in our 24-hour day to tell this story. That's going to run on Sit Room and then again on New Day tomorrow morning. Business.
Hi, Jeff. So as Mike mentioned, the other driving story is TikTok. The owner of ByteDance choosing Oracle to be the app technology partner for its U.S. operations, rejecting that acquisition from Microsoft. This all obviously coming after the Trump administration insisting that TikTok's U.S. operations be sold over these national security concerns. And the administration now appears to be okay with this watered-down deal. Worth noting, though, that Oracle's bid resembling Microsoft's original proposal, the big question clearly is what role politics may have played in the decision. We know Oracle's ties to the president are deep. Co-founder Larry Ellison has raised money for Trump in the past, and its CEO, Safra Khan, right now was the only major tech executive to serve on the president's transition team. The deal, though, worth noting, this is not approved yet. It still needs to go through the Committee of Foreign Investment, or CFIUS, and as well as a separate national security review. Also, the deal remains vulnerable to any larger geopolitical tensions between D.C. and Beijing. Brian Fung and the rest of CNN Business are going big on this story today, and that's where we begin.
Thank you very much. Washington.
Okay, so just in terms of obviously the fires, and Matthew just talked about this, the Trump briefings at 2, remarks will be at 3, and the president will meet with Newsom. Important to remember that this is it took him almost 3 weeks to talk about these fires, and obviously blaming this on forest mismanagement and not climate change. So, and then on the story of the shooting of the LA deputies, that obviously quickly became political. Trump tweeting his outrage at the attack, saying a fast trial and death penalty for the killer. Biden also quickly condemned it, saying that it was unconscionable. So that too, inserting itself into the politics of the time. And I think that's what I've got.
Okay. So before we turn it over to politics, which again I acknowledge is related to much of this, does anybody have anything they want to bring up about anything we talked about or anything else? Politics.
Good morning, Jeff. So as you said, much of it is related. I'll just note a couple of things here. Obviously, just watch Joe Biden when you see him today, and when he's going to give his afternoon remarks to socially distanced reporters about climate change and the fires, and compare that to that Nevada rally last night. You just have a perfect visual contrast in a 12-hour period or so of the way in which these two candidates are campaigning in this COVID election season 50 days before Election Day. The difference could not be more clear in the images that'll be out there today. Joe Biden and his wife voted this morning in the Delaware primary. They did in-person early voting. The primary is tomorrow. So they participated in that today. And like I said, we'll see him at 1 p.m. Eastern. In addition to his comments, excuse me, about the wildfires and about climate change, obviously everybody's going to be watching to see if he also includes remarks about that horrific shooting of the 2 LA County sheriff deputies, and expand upon his statement that he issued over the weekend. So we will be on the lookout for that from Biden. And his running mate, Kamala Harris, as you know, senator from California, she's going to be heading back to California this evening, and I believe we'll be getting an update on the fires tomorrow. MJ Lee is in Wilmington with Biden today, and she and Jessica Dean can split the afternoon and the evening as needed. I want to mention just a couple of other things. One, Arlette reporting this morning, confirming what the New York Times had and expanding upon her previous reporting on this, that the Biden campaign is putting out its sort of election protection program, the biggest, they claim, of any presidential campaign in history. What they're putting in place, both from a litigation point of view, in terms of the now, as well as a sort of protection program for the duration and beyond, in terms of ensuring that the ballots are cast and counted in a fair and complete manner. So Arlette has that just out now as well. The Michael Bloomberg announcement over the weekend, you saw Dana did some reporting on this as well, that he is putting $100 million into Florida. Obviously, that could be a game-changing amount, but I would just note that $100 million in Florida is just as much about Joe Biden winning Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin as it is about trying to make a difference in Florida. It really frees up the Biden campaign to focus and dedicate resources elsewhere, not without having to deal with sort of the headache of figuring out where to put everything in these final 50 days. It is a clear indication from Bloomberg that the Biden folks can go spend heavily elsewhere where they absolutely sort of need to win as a path to 270 if the president repeats his winning performance in Florida. The other thing I would just note, Jeff, when you were talking about the Woodward tapes and yes, the now being so important and how he's handling it now, but the one thing about back then that caught my ear over the weekend was that Ronna Romney McDaniel sound when she sort of tried to defend the president by saying there would be chaos and panic and a run on the bike. What would it be if he created all this panic when there was no plan? And I thought her language about no plan was fascinating to hear from the RNC chairwoman. Well, why wasn't there a plan? It sort of seems to beg the question of. So that sound to me seemed not an entirely successful defense of the president's position about downplaying to avoid panic. You saw Bernie Sanders out over the weekend continuing to push Biden to talk about his economic agenda to motivate progressives and not simply be an anti-Trump candidate. You saw some the stories over the weekend about his world sort of concerned about Biden not doing enough to motivate progressives. I will note that this comes as a new study is out of the University of Pennsylvania this morning showing Biden's spending program, his budget, $5.4 trillion over 10 years. What a difference 4 years makes. That is double the spending that Hillary Clinton proposed in her presidential run 4 years ago. So that study is out this morning as well. And Vanessa Yurkevich was up this morning and I think has another run on Dayside looking at battleground Pennsylvania. She went to one of those 3 pivot counties in Pennsylvania that flipped from Obama in 08 and 12 to Trump and 16. Lucerne County, just next door to where Biden's going to be having that Scranton town hall with us later this week, and talked to a bunch of voters there showing Donald Trump certainly still has some work to do given his record on the pandemic and where things are if he's going to repeat his performance in Pennsylvania, but that there is the opportunity for him to do so. And I think that is where we start, Jeff.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Any thoughts on politics or anything related? Okay. Digital.
Good morning. Concurrent this weekend, or total unique, this weekend, we're in the 25, 26 million range each day. This morning, Collinson is number one at about 13,000 concurrent. The headline is Trump ignoring science and mocking social distancing at his dangerous Nevada indoor rally. Rounding out the rest of the top 5 is the virus CLE, leading with that highest single-day increase in global infections, according to the WHO report. And then we also have all of those country and region breakdowns that Mike mentioned in that DLE. Elon Musk shares his thoughts on Bill Gates and they aren't pleasant. That's from Jasmine Goodwin in Business. The paper towel shortage and why this is happening again. It's another good business story. And then Tropical Storm Sally on track to hit Louisiana weeks after Laura. Slow-moving disaster and one of 5 storms brewing in the Atlantic. The tracker is up and the DLE is up as well. So that's our top 5 this morning. The top video is Tapper pressing Navarro from the weekend. Top for engagement time. There's a handful of stories. The one to call out is the Strong Enterprise piece from John Blake. Trump called him my African American, and he hasn't been the same since. This is on Gregory Cheadle. A handful of other headlines to mention. On COVID, this story has been a real strong performer and still is. New research showing that 3 months after infection, 75% of those hospitalized with COVID still have severe or disabling symptoms. That's Ryan Pryor's story that went out this week, and it's still doing really well. A handful of really good and disturbing fire headlines. 3 of the 4 worst cities in the world for air quality are now in the western United States. The smoke has drifted as far east as Michigan, and it's still going. What you need to know about the impact of exposure to wildfire smoke, about breathing and air quality, what to have in your go bag, and then the DLE is up. We've got updated maps on where the fires are, galleries, all of it, definitely staying on the fires. We have a handful of really good voting pieces this morning. Mismatched signatures are prompting tossed absentee ballots and legal fights. If your signature is not the same, your vote could not get counted. Our Understanding Mail-in Voting Explainer is still up and will stay up through Election Day. It's very good. There's an op-ed on voting in person and how it could help avoid an election nightmare. And then a step back on the census and the dangers of the pandemic and politics interfering with it this year. It's a good zoom-out piece. We have a piece on the 2020 presidential polls explained. It's a conversation between Zach Wolf and Harry Ensign. It's very good, very smart. Richard mentioned the great lineup we have on TikTok and Oracle and Business. A handful of other good business headlines. Amazon is hiring another 100,000 people. Walmart is getting extra real about drone delivery. And then we've got some previews to the Apple event coming tomorrow. We will be all over that, and we're previewing it today. There's a study coming at 11 a.m. on poor sleeping linked to weight gain. That will do well. And lastly, a 42-square-mile sheet of ice has broken off from Greenland's ice shelf, one of the world's largest. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Meredith. John.
Good morning, Jeff. So right now, the top spots, we have these 2 big weather events affecting both sides of the country, waiting for the 11 a.m. update with Chad to see if this flips to hurricane status, as Sally does. Ed Lavandera continues to watch New Orleans, where they're expecting all that rain and fears of flooding. And then Martin Savage in Oregon and Stephanie Elam in Southern California flanking the fire story, which as they continue to roar. We have the mayor of Estacado, Oregon, joining us next hour, hard-hit community. And then later on today with Brooke, female fire chief from rural Oregon. She and many of the people in her crew lost their own homes to the fire, and yet they're continuing to fight the fire to help save other homes. Obviously, it's the backdrop for politics today, with Biden and Trump both taking on the wildfire issue in their own way. 1 p.m. is Biden's address. We will take that. Arlette Saenz is in Wilmington. And then the 3 o'clock hour is then we'll see Trump delivering his remarks as part of the California National Guard. We will take that as well. On coronavirus, we're driving to Jamie Gangel at noon, where we'll release all that new audio tape that builds on the what came out yesterday. Nothing more could have been done. When Trump said that, we'll give it another run of 2. At noon, we are building out significantly with Dr. Rani, Dana Bash, and David Gergen. John Harwood and Caitlin Collins stay on all the fallout and backlash from the Trump rally in Nevada. The governor obviously very upset about what happened there, wondering if they're going to see huge clusters developing in Nevada. The HHS reporting that came out over the weekend will continue to mix that in. It is important and just underscores what's going on with the administration. Elizabeth Cohen on all the big vaccine news and the 11 a.m. study on children. Diana Goladriga, another week into parties. We'll see what Big Ten football does. We We have the Miami-Dade mayor. He'll be keeping county bars closed despite Florida letting them reopen. Brianna has the testing coordinator for the University of Wisconsin. They're scaling out tests to find asymptomatic students. Also with Brianna, the president of Xavier University, one of two HBCU schools in New Orleans that are encouraging students to sign up for vaccine trials, and they are facing some pushback from the students and faculty. And then Brooke has two New York City teachers who say the city is not ready for in-person learning. Staying all over the big international stories, Lauren Lieberman in Jerusalem, Melissa Bell, Paris, and Scott McLean in London. The Vanessa Yurkovich piece on the Pennsylvania county that voted for Obama twice. Trump country now, what happens with this coming election, that is airing next hour. We're bundling together all the voting news that happened the last few days. The Pennsylvania absentee voting delayed, obviously that's the number one because it's most recent. Much like the Wisconsin and Green Party voting delays and the Florida felons voting ruling. We have some bookings on that. Josh Campbell was just up on the deputies ambushed. We'll have him up throughout the day. And Champions for Change. We have two pieces airing today, one at 10 a.m. and one at 1 o'clock, Leon.
Great, thank you. And I'll note Champions for Change in a moment. Washington.
Morning at 4 o'clock, we'll pick up Caitlin has our White House spot, and, of course, we have the new Woodward tapes, the Nevada rally. And in California, we'll cover the fires, of course, as well. Jack Garamendi joins us today, and we can get him both stories. Athena has our COVID wrap. Dr. William Schaffner joins us as well there. MJ Lee live on Biden, and we'll look at his strategy with Latinos in Florida. Also, Rosa has that package looking at schools in Florida withholding COVID data, and Miami Mayor Suarez joins us as well. And, of course, we'll stay on the New Orleans and the storm.
And in the Situation Room, we will keep our focus on all things corona, the continuing spikes in the West and Midwest, the latest vaccine news, the trouble universities across the country are facing, and, of course, the president's handling of the virus will be front and center for us, what he's doing right now, how he and his administration are continuing to flout and mock the science. We'll dig into all of that with our medical voices and our rap pieces. We also have the Rosa Flores piece on Governor DeSantis ordering some school districts to hide their COVID data. We will have Jamie Gangel up around her new Woodward sound. We do have Ambassador John Bolton on today, so we will get his reaction to that. The fires out west obviously will be a focus for us, as well as the hurricane now threatening the Gulf Coast. We'll have Josh out of LA to report on the latest on the attack on the sheriff deputies out there. And as mentioned earlier, we do have that extraordinary and heartbreaking piece from Nima on the devastating tragedy in Yemen right now. And that's where we start.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Kurt. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Hey, Jeff, this is Brandon from Climate. I just wanted to go back to the NOAA appointee and point out that he was the Delaware state climatologist and was forced to step down, basically, because his research came under scrutiny for being funded by fossil fuel companies. So I think that's obviously a point we want to make. And also we should look back to Sharpiegate last year at this time. That's sort of a proven instance of the White House pressuring scientists into making these misleading statements to support the president. And recently, Inspector General report from their department came out and basically called them out for this wrongdoing. So that's just a really proven example of what you were talking about earlier.
Couldn't agree more. Anyone else?
Hey, it's Bianna Goldriger. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Bianna.
Hey, just an update from Alexei Navalny's spokesperson, who said that he is completely off a ventilator now and is able to even at times leave his bed, his hospital bed. So a significant update there on his health.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, before we go, John noted all this week, we've got a terrific series of profiles, 10 people who in our series Champions for Change. Kim Bowie and her team have done a terrific job in putting this together, and so that obviously is a priority through the week. a week-long series. As I noted before, we have new audio from Woodward and Trump at noon today, and then Bob Woodward will be live with Anderson Cooper tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We have Joe Biden Town Hall this Thursday night at 8 p.m. So we've got a lot going on this week and a tremendous amount of news, but stay newsy and urgent.